Hello, my name is Edrem, an animatronic puppet VTuber, and today we're taking a look at something that's not FF14 related. Today we're taking a look at WoW. Now, I'm a former WoW player, right? I played way back in the day, but I always say that the reason I don't ever play WoW anymore is that when I played it for the guild and the friends that play it, right? But they don't play anymore, so I don't really have any reason to come back to the game. But I'm still interested in how they do things, and I'm still interested in the design of World of Warcraft and how it influences other MMOs. But I was told about this post throwing a bit of shade at FF14 for the housing, so I wanted to go over it and talk about how some of these systems could work, right? And how they're probably going to work, and how different that is to WoW, FF14, but also the fact that I don't really trust a lot of the things that Blizzard says. Like, I know that what they say is true, but almost everything they release feels very passed through by lawyers, right? They use a lot of what's called weasel words, which are words that imply something but don't actually say it, right? Like, say for example, like, fights the 7 signs of aging. It's like, fights there is the weasel word for a product, because that doesn't mean it's actually going to do anything. That just means it may help. So we're going to go over this and take a look at this announcement. All right, but first of all, this is a follow-up announcement to Blizzard announcing strange sentence. They're adding housing to the game. After so many years, so many people asking for it, they're adding player housing. And they're doing a little bit of a look into how they want the systems to work now, right? It's still a very long way off. So it's just kind of like, hey, here's our plans, here's our hopes. Which is why I think it's a little bit too soon to throw shade in another MMO. But let's go through it. The construction of the new housing system in Azeroth is underway, and we're taking you behind the scenes to give you an early look at what housing development team has been working on. Watch your step and boat 9 in the dust. Hard hats are not required. Welcome home, adventurers. We're excited to kick off our first look at housing in World of Warcraft and share some philosophies and the plans for this new feature with you. First up, we're focusing on our high-level design pillars for housing, as well as talking about the few key areas of housing as we lay the foundation for future discussions. We have lots to cover, so let's jump in. Fortifying housing with pillars. In developing such a large new feature, it's useful to start by first defining its pillars and help the development team get on the same page before we start building, as well as providing a guiding light when making decisions, identifying priorities. It's important to note that while these pillars are broad in scope by their nature, they aren't all-encompassing. Just because something isn't mentioned in a pillar doesn't mean it's not important or isn't part of the feature. And this part is fine. I like this. This is like a really basic, like, hey, here's how we're approaching the game dev side of this, right? Like, here's how we're going and doing things. That's completely fine. Our 3 pillars for housing. I got some concept art here for Horde House. Quite like. Boundless self-expression. Our highest priority is to allow players to build a house that shows off their own personal tastes or their warbands, acts as a desired backdrop for role-playing, or just allows players to create something in a flight of fancy. Toolshed should be easy enough for someone with no 3D experience to be comfortable with and use successfully. It should also be powerful enough that players can surprise us with their creations or drill down to get the tiniest details just right. The gamut of decor operations spans not just the cultures of Azeroth, but the many expansions of World of Warcraft as well. Now this is... it's something where I'm like, okay, I understand where they're going with this, but I kind of want something here that says, like, yes, we're allowing people to do things that are just not World of Warcraft themed, right? Like, when you say own personal tastes or their warbands, to me that still sounds like Blizzard wants people to make WoW style houses, right? They want you to use WoW friendly items. They want you to use stuff that's in World of Warcraft's world. Whereas I look at some of the most popular houses in FF14 and I'm like, people have just completely broken out of what that game is, right? Like the fact that we have nightclubs in 14 does not match anything else in the game at all. There's they don't match any of the visual style of the rest of the game, but it's something that people absolutely love. So my only worry here is that they want to keep people locked into a certain style and that they're not going to go too far into the let's just make you free to do whatever the hell you want, right? And that's going to be quite limiting then in getting people interested. Like if people are limited to like, oh, you can make a house, yeah, but you're still limited to making kind of mostly Alliance or mostly Horde themed items. It's not going to be great. And I think for the fact that they are coming in with housing now, like they need to have a lot of items on release. Like you need a lot of items because that's when you're going to get the most interest in doing this at the start. Final Fantasy could build up over the years with all the items they've added because the player base built up over the years and it was a concept that was refined. But now that 14 housing exists and Guild Wars 2 housing exists, WoW can't release with a lot less features, a lot less items. It needs to have a huge amount, and I don't know if they're going to have items that let me make stupid things in there, right? Let people make nightclubs, people make all kinds of weird cafes, let people make all kinds of things that don't fit into the World of Warcraft theme. If they can do that, that's fine. But this is one of the things where I'm like, I don't know if I trust Blizzard to do that. I don't know if I trust Blizzard to actually give players the tools for their own self-expression like that. But we'll see. Deeply social. World of Warcraft is more fun with other players, and housing should be no different. While players can enjoy housing purely on their own, its systems are designed at a fundamental level to encourage interacting, playing, and progressing with friends, neighbors, guilds, and the wider community in a meaningful way. Now, this is one of the things that immediately kind of like, no, don't tie in some kind of progression. Please don't make this like a way that you get something in the game unrelated to housing. Or please don't make it so I have to progress through the housing system to get things. Like, we all complain about the lack of medium and large plots in 14. It's making me think like, oh man, what if they had it so it was like an unlock where you had to do a certain amount of things before you could actually unlock the medium for your plot in WoW. I don't like the idea of any kind of progression system other than the amount of items I collect to put into my house, right? So this is one that's a little bit worrying to me when I'm like, the system should be for the creativity of the players and to get them out in the world collecting things. Like, I think this is a really good opportunity to put housing items all over content in the game. Get people to collect it. Because WoW certainly is far more of a collectathon than 14, right? People love doing their mount farms. People love doing their transmog collections. Imagine having collections for housing. So I'm a little bit iffy on this. A long-lasting journey. Housing is being built as an evergreen addition to the game, with its own roadmap, reaching across multiple patches and into future expansions, which is very good. Housing isn't something players should expect to finish, but instead continue to look forward to the next housing release, be it new content or systems. The long-term commitment for us as developers and offers players rewards all along the way. That's a generally good statement. Yeah, they want to keep it developed in the future and keep on adding things. That's cool. I wouldn't mind if they do it the same way that like 14 does it, where like, hey, every patch, let's just add in a few more items here and there, add in a few more things. And then maybe now and again you add in a large feature, right? Like 14 is currently talking about adding it so small houses can have a large interior. Like that's a good change. But yeah, we'll go on. One more important note, even though it's not an explicit pillar, the wide adoption is a primary consideration for us as well. Most players should want a house in Azeroth, and if a player wants a house in Azeroth, they can have a house in Azeroth. Furthermore, housing is being designed to scale with the player's interest. wants to spend dozens of hours a week on their house, that's great. If they're only interested in coming and going once or twice a month, that's great too. Don't exactly know how this is going to work other than the fact that they're talking about progression system. But we'll see. I don't know what exactly they mean by this. Like, this could just be them being like, hey, if people want to spend a long amount of time, you know, designing the house, that's fine. But players could kind of just go in and place some basic items down, and that's fine too, I guess. We've seen a lot of discussion and speculation from the community on where players will be able to have houses. We decided early on that there'll be 2 housing zones available at launch, one for Alliance and one for Horde. More possible place to live in the future. The Alliance zone takes inspiration from Elwynn Forest with touches of Westfall and Dustwood, while the Horde's is inspired by Durotar, its coastline, and Endashara. There are 2 main reasons for this decision. Having many housing zones conflicts with the second pillar of designing a feature that is deeply social. In a world where players can live in many different zones, they become increasingly spread out, and even with aggressive sharding, hence seeing other players, much less interacting with them, drops quickly. I'm not too sure what this means, like what they're saying with this, because in my mind, right, it would be the similar system to 14 where you have wards. And it's like, you can add more and more wards. It doesn't really matter too much for an area. Like, I don't quite know what they mean by this, because they also have stuff further down where they talk about the fact that the servers are going to automatically add new wards to a zone with instancing when you have more players adding more houses. But maybe it's like, okay, they've got some design in place for this that is going to work better with the system. Either way, just saying like, hey, we're going to start out with 2 zones, 1 Horde, 1 Alliance. That's perfectly fine. And I really like the idea of Durotar and Elwynn Forest as the starting, because it's like, yeah, that's the basic human and orc locations. That's great. Though I would love undead. When they're going to undead zone? Putting it bluntly, zones are a lot of work. You'd much rather do a great job with a small number of zones and do a passable job on a large number. That's completely fair. Come up with solutions that take the player out of the world into our own personal instance of a zone. We chose these as our starting points because of how iconic they are for our respective factions and how much they feel like home to so many players already. Although the instancing thing I'm a little bit confused about. Because I assume it would all be instance. We're excited for what we'll be able to accomplish with the 2 zones, and we'll be sharing more of what this means in future updates. Outfitting your home. You got an example of the Alliance themed house. Similarly, there have been discussions in the community on whether housing will be pay to play / win or not, along with other conversations around real world money. We've been very aligned in our internal conversations that housing is designed to be primarily player first and not revenue first. Now this is one of those things where I'm like, this is a meaningless statement. No company is going to admit that their system is revenue first and not player first. Like, yeah, they put it in there to say it, but it doesn't actually really necessarily mean it, right? Like, I'm sure Blizzard would be like, yeah, WoW is a player first game, not a revenue first game. And then they also put the $90 amount on the cash shop, right? It's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't really mean anything or guarantee anything. And I can absolutely see there being some housing items available for some real world money, right? Like 14 does it. WoW's going to do it as well. Housing will offer hundreds and hundreds of decorations and house customizations via in-game rewards. We'll also offer a smaller number of items in the cash shop as well. Yeah, now, when you say smaller number of items, the other problem there is, what if they're a smaller number, but they're the really good items that players want? This is comparable to how transmogs and pets are currently handled in game versus the shop. Yeah, similar thing there. There's some really good transmogs for the shop stuff. I mean, more the mounts are cool, but pets are cool too. We want to allow players to have as many options as possible, creating a perfect home in Azeroth. Again, this one, like, I'm gonna have to see this when it comes out, but I assume that they're probably going to start a little bit slow on the monetization. They're going to add a lot of things in and they're slowly crank it up to see how people are handling it. I can especially see like a guild with their housing being like, yeah, we can buy a few things, right? We can buy a few things for the guild. A home for everyone. Part of a focus on wide adoption, we wanted to ensure that housing is available to everyone. If you want a house, you can have a house. No exorbitant requirements or high purchase costs, no lotteries, and no onerous upkeep. And if your subscription lapses, don't worry, your house doesn't get repossessed. Now, this is the line that I saw people go wild over because they're like, oh, throw in shade at 14. Throw in shade at 14. I don't quite know how this is going to work. One thing that I've said, actually, is that player demolition, weirdly enough, was a player requested feature in 14, right? Because what happened is, back when wards used to just be like FC only, you had a lot more of a community in a ward. Like I remember during Heaven's Ward, we would hang out with the GP players of a house just near us, right? Because you'd more likely hang out with your FC. I think player housing was kind of a mistake in 14, a little bit. I do like the idea of every FC should have a ward, should have a house, not necessarily every player. But the thing there is that when people stopped playing, these wards became more and more dead because the houses would just sit there permanently. So people asked for some kind of way for the houses to get demolished for people who were no longer playing the game. Now, obviously, probably like 45 days is a little bit too low for the demolish timer, right? Like it should be more aimed at people who have stopped playing the game permanently. But it was still something the community asked for, and it's something where I don't know how Blizzard is going to handle this if they're not doing the same thing. And this is also one of the things where I'm like, this feels very like well written to kind of not say anything too much, right? Because they say no exorbitant requirements. That doesn't mean no requirements. It just means no exorbitant. High purchase costs. Well, what's considered high, right? No lotteries. I mean, that's just straight up no lotteries, so it's probably no lottery system. And no onerous upkeep. Now, this is one of the ones that got me a little worried when I read this, because I'm like, that does not say no upkeep. Right? It doesn't say no upkeep. That says no onerous, which means excessive, which again is up to interpretation. That's why it's a bit of a weasel word. So I don't know exactly how they're going to do this, but I feel like they're leaving themselves open to adding these things later. Right? This feels like it's a very lawyery thing of no, you need to say exactly this because you may do this in the future, right? And there's an interesting thing about this where the things you say publicly online about a feature can be, if it's an advertising point of view, right? It can be false advertising to have a feature that is then not that in the future. And you can get some really bad consumer fines against this, right? For example, Minecraft, when it was still owned by Notch, he said that, hey, Minecraft, all future content for the game is going to be free. Right? You buy Minecraft, all future content is going to be free. And it has been. Even when it was changed over to Microsoft, they still had to keep that because that was a public thing that Notch said about the game. So Microsoft's kind of workaround for that is they're going to make a separate game called Bedrock Edition. And from a legal standpoint, that's a completely different product. So Bedrock Edition, there is paid content in that game, but they can never add it to the Minecraft Java Edition. In a similar way, part of my thinking for Overwatch 2 and why they were like, we're making Overwatch 2 instead of just updating Overwatch 1 is one of the big things that they said for Overwatch 1 is that all the heroes would always be free. Right? You would never have to pay to unlock any of the heroes in Overwatch 1. So let's say you make a sequel game, you're no longer bound by that commitment. That's one of those things I'm like, is that why they called it Overwatch 2? I don't know, but also Overwatch 2 was a messy development was going on, and it's also like, why didn't they just call it Overwatch 1, right? Like, why didn't they just update the base game? It feels like one of those things where they were thinking of doing that, right? They were thinking of like, yeah, let's just charge more for the heroes, and then the game kind of exploded and people have stopped playing it. Mostly, kind of now. Well, no. But it's certainly not as popular as it used to be. So, yeah, I don't know what this is going to mean. It kind of means nothing to me because it's not actually guaranteeing anything except for the fact that there's no lotteries. Even on the, if your subscription lapses, don't worry, your house doesn't get repossessed. This is one of those things where I think, okay, let's imagine 14 made a change to the feature. Let's imagine they made it so if you don't play the game for 45 days, your house, you lose the plot, but you don't lose the house. Right? Now, from a technical standpoint, your house hasn't been repossessed. You've lost access to the plot, but your house is still there. And the idea then is like, well, if you can find another plot, you can put the house back on it and restore it, right? Now, that's not the way that 14 currently works. Currently, if you lose the house, you lose a whole bunch of things and you have to go and reclaim all the items. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if Blizzard is going to do that here, because they could potentially be like, well, you've lost access to this ward, this plot, but you can buy another one, you can move the house around, because there is moving houses between the wards. So I don't know. This is also one of those things where I'm like, this could be wording very specifically around this. Your houses are also shared amongst your warband, with your different characters being able to come and go as you see fit. The other bit there that's worrying here is houses. I'm like, I don't think a player should own more than one. I mean, certainly in 14, I don't know exactly how it's going to work in WoW, but I feel like more than one is a bit eh. The orc character can hang out in your alliance house without a problem. Housing wards are also shared across your warband, so you'll be able to use your decor collection no matter what character owns it. I see that can help make up for it, but yeah, I don't quite know about owning multiple houses. We'll have to see how that works. I could see they talk later on about features with, like, you have the public instancing where it's like everyone has a house that they can have in there, and then you've got like the private instancing where you could have like guilds and everyone can have a house in there. Like, I can see that being a thing. Like, you got your public house and you got your guild ward house, but I don't want people to have too many public houses. That feels a bit strange. Furthermore, it's not just warbands that cross factional lines, but friendships as well. So you're able to live in or visit your friends or guildmates' houses in the neighborhoods with minimal restrictions regarding faction. For example, while it's not possible for your human character to buy a house in the Horde zone, your troll character in the same warband can, and your human can use it as if they're their own. That's a really nice feature. Like, obviously, a big thing in World of Warcraft is the fact that things are more account bound because it is far more alt game, right? Like, you have a lot of alt characters, whereas 14 is like, 14 is great for the fact that you've got everything on the one character and you get really attached to that one character, but also if you ever make an alt in that game, you're going to have a horrible, horrible time. So this is nice that they're doing this, because it's like, yeah, it would be expected that stuff from your warband can traverse over to the other side. Will you be my neighbor? Inspirational concept for what the new Horde neighborhood could be. Like, this looks good. This looks good. Little house and little pots and things going around the place. Could be good. Before we go, I want to mention the concept of neighborhoods as a small tease. Houses are organized into roughly 50 plot neighborhoods, letting players live next to each other, work together, and share in the rewards of being part of a neighborhood. Again, I don't like the idea of like rewards or this or kind of progression. Hopefully the true reward is the friends you made along the way and not kind of any progression system. But yeah. Neighborhoods are instant but crucially also persistent, so your neighbors can be your neighbors for years to come until one of you moves. Neighborhoods also come in two flavors. So you got public neighborhoods. The game servers are responsible for creating as needed and maintaining, and private neighborhoods created by groups of friends or guilds to inhabit, progress, and customize together. Again, what do you mean by progress? That's a scary word to me in this situation. So while an individual player can have a house, a community can have a neighbor. And this is also the part where I'm like, they could monetize the hell out of this, right? Private neighborhoods as a monetization thing could absolutely be a big selling point. I'm again thinking back to like the Minecraft thing, right? It's like while Minecraft itself gets all the updates for free, what Microsoft did then is to say, hey, Realms, here's really easy hosting of a private server for you and your friends, and it's only like however much money, $15 or whatever a month, right? I don't know what currency in what country. I could see them doing this here, especially when, you know, Blizzard is owned by Microsoft now, so they have access to all the Azure instance servers that Microsoft owns. I could see them being a thing of like, hey, you want to have a guild neighborhood? Get a little bit of progress and some kind of benefit for the guild as well, and then you can have all the people move in from that. Like, it'll only be like $15 a month. I can see people doing that. I can see a guild doing that for the people in their guild. So that might be alright. Definitely depends on like what the cost benefit of this is. But I'm always worried that they're going to have some kind of incentive to do it. Right? Some kind of progress that can be made on this kind of thing. But anyway, it's just an initial look at the blueprint we're working on for housing. There's a lot more ground to cover and details to get into. I look forward to your thoughts and feedback as we share more articles in the future. This thing of, I like the idea and I like that they're explaining this, but obviously there's some things that I'm still a little bit worried about. One of the big ones unrelated to the monetization is, again, this is all fine, making a house like this, but can you make a nightclub, right? Can you make a cat cafe? These are things that people are legitimately going to want to make in WoW. No, people are not going to all want to make the same kind of World of Warcraft themed housing. There's certainly going to be a lot of that, but let people break out of the mold, go really, really strange and completely off theme, and people will absolutely love it. Like, that's a big reason I see so many people like FF14's housing, even though Guild Wars 2 I think is probably a lot better in terms of the customization. It's just they can go wild with the amount of items and what they can change around and what they can do with it, right? Even though it has so many limitations. People still get very, very, very creative with the items. And the developers seem to know that because they keep adding items that are like, yeah, these are things that could be like used to make just a really cool modern kitchen. Doesn't fit the Final Fantasy theme at all, but it's modern. So that's my first big worry. My second worry is the monetization. And my third worry, and this is something that they don't bring up, is why I think this is a little bit weird to throw shade at 14 for, is garrisons. Alright, like the last time they had any kind of attempt at a player customization housing system was garrisons, and it was universally hated. And it also was terrible for the game because it got everyone to basically stay in the garrison all the time because it was the optimal way to play the game, right? But the big thing there, I think, is not what actually Garrisons was when it released, but it's what they promised, right? Well, not necessarily promised, but it's what they announced first of Garrisons, because they hyped up that feature, right? When they first announced it, when they first detailed how it was going to work, it actually sounded really, really good. Things get cut back, things get scaled down, things have to be done certain ways because of spaghetti code, which, by the way, you should watch the video I did on spaghetti code. And then we got the garrison system that released that people did not like. That was not at all appeasing the players that actually wanted some kind of customization and unique, interesting area that is their own. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again later. Bye.